Hi guys, welcome back. The last video got a little bit long. This is going to be part 2 of the ranking top 12, I guess, Beatles albums. And so we have four more albums to go. And I have a lot to talk about with these 4 albums, so I decided to break this video up so I could make it a little bit longer and talk about these other albums. So next up at number 4 is the fantastic folk pop record that is Rubber Soul, the Beatles' 6th studio album. To me, I feel like this is the first Beatles album that really feels like a studio album. This is the first album, I believe, of all original material, no covers on this album, and of course, not a movie tie-in either. There's just a very solid album. Of course, it's been described as a folk rock album, which is very accurate, I believe. This album has, of course, the Ringo song of What Goes On, and of course, George Harrison has a couple songs on here, especially Think for Yourself, which is a really good song. Just the guitar work on that is so good. And Paul McCartney has some nice songs as well. Of course, Michelle, Ma Belle, and stuff like You Won't See Me Drive My Car, which are alright. But I have to go with I'm Looking Through You for one McCartney song on this album, which has just got so much going for it, to be honest. I honestly feel like Revolver was revenge for John Lennon stealing Rubber Soul. Paul McCartney stole Revolver. I feel like that was revenge, and George as well. Just because I have to get into the topic of John Lennon's songs on Rubber Soul. Obviously, everybody talks about Norwegian Wood, which is a very good song. It's a very weird song, but it's definitely interesting concept. I don't know why he destroys her house, but okay. So, okay, whatever. And then, of course, Nowhere Man, in addition to having amazing harmonies and being one of the few times John Lennon actually writes in third person for part of the song, it's just a really good, really interesting lyrics and very introspective, and I really like the word. Just a very nice song there. And of course, he ends up the album with Run For Your Life, which has become a joke among the community. But there is actually a really interesting story behind this song, although it does sound, you could say, misogynistic. You do have to remember that Paul McCartney once wrote a song on a Beatles album called Maxwell's Silver Hammer, where he had a kid killing a teacher and like 3 people with a hammer. So I honestly don't take these things too seriously. Now, John Lennon, again, you wouldn't take the song seriously because it doesn't have a serious tone. It's a very upbeat and kind of silly type song. I mean, to me, I take this in the vein of I'll Cry Instead, so kind of in that vein. And the song, obviously the line he originally got from an Elvis song, it was not even his line, and he later said he regretted writing the song. But it is kind of an odd song on there. Apparently George Harrison liked it, so that's interesting. And of course there's Wait, which is just a really good song as well. But I feel like I should mention the best song on the album, and everybody knows this is coming in my life. I actually have the quote from that. Although I never lose affection from people and things that went before, and though I often stop and think about them in my life, I love you more. I actually have that quote on my Facebook profile right now, so definitely, you know, big fan of that song, and it's absolutely fantastic. And it's also really interesting when you realize that I believe he was 65. He would have been 25 when he wrote it, which is not old. Not old at all. I mean, I'm 16. That's scary, like, to think about, because he was already over halfway through his life, so that's really scary when you think about that. But anyway, getting back to the list, I'm going to go with number 3, which is the White Album, or the self-titled Beatles album, The Beatles. Double LP here. There is just so much to dig into with the double LP. Now, honestly, because it's a double LP, of course, there's going to be a lot of filler, but I even like the filler. I like the album for its absurdity. And what's the double LP? I feel like I should just get sort of Ringo and George's stuff out of the way for the most part. Just to talk about it really quick, of course, Ringo wrote the song Don't Pass Me By, which is a fun little song. Got a little fiddle on it. And of course he sang the John Lennon written song Good Night, which is in essence a lullaby, and it closes up the album. And of course, George Harrison has 4 songs on this album, 1 per side. A song on side 1 is While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is just absolutely iconic song, although some of the lyrics are a little bit badly written. Look at the floor, and I see it needs sweeping, which, what? How did that pass the drawing board, sir? But I do believe George Harrison was a very good songwriter, and of course, the guitar work and stuff on this album is just so good, and of course, on the song in particular, his guitar work is good. The song on his side 2 is Piggies, which is either making fun of policemen or authority in general, I'm not really sure. And of course, given the time period and the 60s and protests and all that, I do understand where that was coming from. Not my favorite song to listen to, but it is there to make a point. Of course, I think of Animal Farm, and I think of Pink Floyd's Pigs later on. And I think of that sort of thing when I think of that song. Then on side 3, closing out side 3, he has the song Long, 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 which is another really nice, slow song. And then, of course, there is Savoy Truffle on side 4, which I talked about in my White Album ranking video. It is about Eric Clapton's teeth, which I don't really know what to say about that, but okay. So, moving on to Everything Else, which is all written by Lennon or McCartney at one point, and also they were inspired by their trip to India. There's several songs inspired by monkeys and inspired by their trip to India, so of course, there's Sexy Sadie, inspired by the trip to India, which John Lennon was talking about the person they were seeing in India, and didn't want to make fun of George Harrison, so he used this metaphor for a girl, I guess. I don't really know. And then, of course, there's Why Don't We Do It in the Road, which I talked about, again, in my White Album ranking video. If you haven't seen that, I will link that one down below. So, if you haven't seen the White Album ranking videos, I will link them. But, anyway, this is one, a very filler type song, and of course, we can't forget Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey. Don't really know what that one is about. Just has some really nice guitar work on it, and, I don't really know what it's about either, but it's just a good song, catchy and all that. Then of course we have some of the other non-filler type songs. Of course, the first side of the album is absolutely fantastic. In addition to While My Guitar Gently Weeps, we have a lot of good Lennon and McCartney songs on this, which there's definitely a lot to it in terms of the opening set of Back in the USSR, which is just a fantastic McCartney song. It's a spoof of the Beach Boys, spoof of Chuck Berry, all that. And, of course, the follow-up, which is Lennon's Dear Prudence, which just absolutely beautiful song. And then we get Glass Onion, which is just kind of a whole Easter egg hunt and a little reference. And, of course, Obladi Oblada. And you got some filler things. You've got all the honey pies, and you've got all that stuff. But I should probably talk about a couple other songs that just deserve mention. Happiness is a Warm Gun. Just a really interesting song. I just love the guitar work and the just rapid mood changes and the rapid style changes of the song, and the fact that he could turn a line from a magazine or a commercial into a song, that sort of brilliance there in lyricism. And I feel like I'm So Tired also deserves mention in that regard, how it's literally a song that John Lennon wrote when he couldn't sleep in India. And of course Blackbird, beautiful Paul McCartney acoustic song, and of course there's Julia, John Lennon's acoustic song on the album. Both absolutely fantastic songs. And I feel like Birthday deserves a mention, of course, as a catchy song on side 3. And of course John Lennon's Your Blues, just a very nice song, and it's got so much grit to it, so much passion. And I can see, honestly, that 4-person band that got put together, they should have stayed together as a band. And you've got like pre-grunge going on here. So honestly, just fantastic song. And of course, Helter Skelter definitely deserves a mention. Just absolutely so much guitar work going on there. There's so much power and enthusiasm. And of course the end, where Ringo screams, "I've got blisters on my fingers," and just the whole thing, just the end of that song. And of course, I can't finish this discussion without mentioning Revolution Number 9. Of course, Revolution Number 1 is a good song. You should check out the single version, Revolution, but Revolution Number 9 is just a bizarre song. There's just so much to it. It's not really a song, it's a avant-garde composition, which John Lennon, George Harrison, and Yoko Ono worked on, and Paul McCartney didn't want it on the album, but I'm kind of glad it made it, because it's very interesting things to listen to. I mean, John Lennon didn't want Obladi Oblada on the album, which I like that song. And of course, there's a very nice little song, Cry Baby Cry, on side 4, but for the most part, I would say most of side 4 is filler. So that's about all I have to say. Probably the longest description I had to make of that, because it was a double LP. Next up at number 2 is Abbey Road. I honestly don't know what to say about this album, other than that it is near perfection. The only reason this album isn't number 1, other than how much I love my number 1, which you obviously know what it is now because there's only one album left. The only reason Abbey Road isn't number 1 is because of 2 songs in particular. One song which I don't hate, and one song which I kind of do. So, a song which I don't hate, but don't really think is my favorite, is the Ringo composition, Octopus Garden. I'm not sure if I prefer this over Don't Pass Me By or not. They're both kind of for me. I'm not a big fan of Ringo as a songwriter. I understand George Harrison did have a lot of potential as a songwriter, and obviously took off in his solo career, which is awesome. But, of course, I don't see a lot going on with, this here, and I do really enjoy. I'm just not a fan of Ringo's stuff as much. And the song that really annoys me is Paul McCartney's Maxwell's Silver Hammer, that aforementioned that song, talking about him killing kids or whatever. It's just a kid killing people. It's a very silly song. It's not supposed to be taken seriously, but I just don't like the sound of it. I find it irritating. It's just not a song I enjoy. So I usually will skip over those 2 songs. So that is the only reason this album isn't number 1, but everything else makes it on some way. This was the last album they recorded as a band, and the second last one to be released. If they had stayed together going in this prog rock direction, they could have become Pink Floyd, and I don't know how I feel about that. Also, I'm going to mention that if they had stayed together, they would have kept making more Let It Be's and kept fighting, and would have had Jet and Imagine released on the same album, and My Sweet Lord and some crappy Ringo song released on the same album. So, yeah. I mean, no, those songs weren't released at the same time, but I'm just making an example of all their songs just mishmashed into, like, yeah, they needed to break up when they did, for reasons. I'm not going to go into it, other than that George and John did not get along, but, I mean, not George and John, I mean, they didn't get along either, but Paul and John needed to get makeup, whatever. So, back on topic, the album is really good. There's this whole medley at the end. I especially love You Never Give Me Your Money at the beginning of the medley. And, of course, toward the end, the Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight in the end. And I love some of these single songs on here come together. Great opening track, that bass line. And, of course, George Harrison's songs on here, Something and Here Comes the Sun. Just fantastic songs. And I should probably mention Paul McCartney's Oh Darling. He's just such a good vocalist there. And John Lennon's I Want You. Oh my goodness, that song. It's just the same guitar chords over and over. And just playing off one riff that goes on and on and on. And then at the end, it's just... And it's one lyric. It's 2 lines. That entire song is 2 lines. I want you so bad. I want you so bad, it's driving me mad, it's driving me mad. And then she's so heavy. It's 2 or 3 lines, the entire song. And it's just so... The way he plays off the guitar and all that, and just everything is so good, and I just can't get over it. Then, of course, there's Because, which uses the same chord progression as I Want You. And triple tracking harmonies. Triple tracking harmonies are also used on Sun King in the medley. So, really, just, wow. Wow, this album. And, of course, there's the notorious little Easter egg at the end of the album, Her Majesty, which is not a secret anymore. Alright, number 1. It's Sgt. Pepper's. What did you expect? You know me. Say you know me. No, not that kind of you know me. So, honestly, the only songs actually, no, there's not any songs I dislike on this album. This album is perfection to me. I feel like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds has slightly worn out Welcome on Me just because it's such a talked about song, but it's still amazing. And, while I'm here, I should talk about, Goodbye for Little Hope for My Friends, which is the one Ringo song I like, and George has a song on here, Within You Without You, which is just amazing. The end track, Day in the Life, just perfection of songcraft. I mean, it's up there with Bohemian Rhapsody in terms of how good of a song it is. Okay? Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of other songs I could mention on this album, but you're really just better off listening to it. I'm going to make a full video on Sgt. Pepper. I'm going to rank all the songs like I did with the White Album. So, you're probably just better off listening to the album. It's just that good. There's nothing I dislike on the album. I've heard it, like, literally hundreds of times, and there's no complaints. I have no complaints. There you go. Guys, if you like this video, click like, subscribe to my channel, and